Hello viewers, today I have a special treat for you. This is my 1991 GMC Syclone pickup truck, which I've had for 8 years. I bought this truck in 2011. Originally a Texas truck. It's been in Canada for quite a few years now, I think since '06 or something like that. 138,000 miles. 139,000 now, actually, it just turned. So it's been used. Original paint. You see some of the evidence of original paint. This flaking along the bottom here was a kind of a 1990s GM thing. The paint wasn't the greatest adhering. A few little nicks and scratches on this truck, but overall, for an original truck, original paint, and being a southern truck originally, no rust. It really does look very clean underneath. Fairly stock, a couple of minor upgrades on this truck. One being, it's got the stainless steel exhaust system. Stainless all the way from the cat back. Nice system. It's fairly expensive back in the day. It was an upgrade to the an aftermarket upgrade that was sold for a few years. I don't think you can buy them anymore. There are only 2,997 of these trucks built. Very rare, 1 year only. I'm going to show you this. It's a little piece of double-sided tape there. I have a receipt from 1993 from a dealer in the US where the owner was, the original owner, when the truck was still on warranty, complained about some rattling with the cladding here. And the dealer put a piece of double-sided tape and stuck this cladding back on so it didn't shake around and rattle. I guess there was some noises. I've never noticed any noises, but that just speaks to the originality of the truck. That was done in 1993. And it's obviously not doing anything anymore, but I just leave it there as evidence of the originality to go with that receipt that I have from the warranty work that was done. It's got an X-Tang Aftermarket tonneau cover. These originally came with the older style tonneau cover with the snaps on the side. So that's long gone. This thing's nice. It's a nice upgrade. It's on hydraulics. So it goes up like that. Good seals all the way around, doesn't let any water in. I keep some cardboard in the back just if I have to haul anything, we don't get the box scratched up. But it's been used over the years. It's got a few little dents and scratches and stuff inside, so it's been used. The tailgate down. Look at this. Do not exceed 500 pounds. So it wasn't set up to handle any weight. It's more of a car-like setup than anything, with the all-wheel drive and the lowered suspension and so forth. It wasn't set up to do any hauling. Inside's been really looked after. Let's see, not a lot of wear and tear showing. I mean, this is all very, very nice and new looking. So it's been parked inside, I would imagine, over the years by the previous owners and me. I do have a 2-pod gauge holder here for a boost gauge and an air fuel gauge, and then I bought a ScanMaster 3, which one of the actually a Grand National enthusiast developed that box for the Grand National, and then he adapted it for Cyclones and Typhoons. It's kind of cool. You can scroll through and look at all the vehicle sensors: temperature, air intake temperature, engine RPM, coolant temperature, fuel injection data. It's kind of cool. It allows you to view all that stuff. Gauge package, full gauge package, same as the Sunbird GT of the early 90s. I've got the original stereo, but I put in this aftermarket Alpine with Bluetooth and the ability to stream your music or take phone calls. Behind the seats, I've got two 8-inch subs in little boxes. They kind of fit pretty good beside each other there, and then there's just a single amplifier to power those subs, velcroed to the back carpet. And that leaves this side, the driver's side behind the seat, open for a little tiny bit of cargo space. There's 6 or 7 inches of space there if you need to carry a bag or something, but not a lot of space in these old trucks. Dash is all good, no cracks or anything. Oh, I forgot the most important part. Come on, baby. It's hard to do with one hand, boys. 4.3 liter, single turbo. There's the turbo down here. Now, from the factory, these trucks had a plastic tube that came up from here and ran across the front, and the stock airbox sits in here. Those plastic tubes have become brittle since 1991, and many of them have failed. In fact, this truck, I'm told by the previous owner, failed. A little piece of plastic fell out of that tube in a crack or something and got sucked into the turbo and ruined the original turbo. So this is a replacement turbo, exact same spec as the original one, but the guy had to replace this turbo because of that piece of plastic. So since then he ran it like this, and I've just kept this set up like this. The original orange tube here is just connected into a K&N cone air filter, and I've used a small series, what group is that? I forget. Anyway, the small group, series group 11 or something. That's very thin, and it fits actually right down there in the between the headlight basically and the front right wheel well. It kind of just sits in there with friction. I've got some rubber matting kind of pressed against the battery just to keep it from rattling around, and it's actually quite solid in there. Probably should be held down. If I ever took it to a drag strip or something, I'd have to put a proper bolt-in hold down in there, but it's very solid in there. It's a pain to get out because it's so jammed in there. This truck is stock under the hood for the most part. Couple little, I guess, maintenance enhancements. Originally, this is the charge air cooler, or the intercooler, which takes coolant from a little radiator underneath there, underneath the front. There's an electric pump that pumps that coolant. One of these is a feed hose and one's a return, up into the cooler up here, which cools the intake charge after it comes out of the turbocharger under pressure. Comes through here, cools down a little bit before it goes into the throttle body. From the factory, there were steel lines coming, or metal lines coming out of here, and they kind of snaked all through here. You'll see a metal tube if you look at a completely factory one, and they kind of come down here and snake down and get back to the under the vehicle like that. A lot of guys have removed those over the years. 2 reasons. One, because if you ever have to take this off to do any kind of servicing underneath, change spark plugs or whatever, that was a real pain to disconnect the factory units, because you'd pull the lines off back here and then the coolant would spill all over the place, which is a real pain. Where like this, with these flexible rubber lines, you can unhook the cooler here and just lift the whole thing up with the coolant line still attached and set it over on the other side of the engine bay and not spill a drop and save yourself a bunch of time. So a lot of guys have done that. Also, it's thought that the metal lines running all through the engine effectively pick up a lot of heat. When you're trying to cool down the coolant, that's not a good idea to pick up heat from the engine. So the rubber hose is mounted a little further from the heat source, and also being rubber and being insulating, in theory, I guess keep that coolant cooler. So a bit, I don't know what the science is behind that, whether there's any evidence for that, but it seems to make sense. You know, why would you want metal lines running all over your engine filled with a liquid that you're trying to get cool so that you can cool the air going into the engine? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So those were removed, again, by the previous owner and thrown away. I do have a fuel pressure sensor. That's what this is. And the sensor is mounted, the sending unit is mounted remotely. So here's the fuel rail here, come up here, and I've got the actual odometer sender just tied to the original EGR bracket where the EGR module used to sit. So it keeps the weight of that sender off the fuel rail, because if you mount that thing right to the fuel rail, you've got weight sitting on the fuel rail, vibrating in heat and so forth, and eventually you could crack that fuel rail and spray fuel all over the place, which would not be fun. So this adds a margin of safety. Original ABS brakes, original remote mounted oil filter, which feeds into the oil cooler in the rad. Again, a lot of guys have removed those. They start to leak. There's a whole bunch of different places where there's different seals and O-rings and lots of potential for leaks. This one's pretty clean. It doesn't really leak, so I'm going to leave it until it starts leaking. When it starts leaking, you can get rid of it all, buy an adapter to put a small oil filter right on the block. So you clean up the engine bay, reduce leaks, and really the oil cooler with modern oils really isn't required. It doesn't make that much difference. Other than that, all stock under here. No internal engine mods or anything like that. Just factory original. Alright guys, that's a little bit of a walk around. We'll get this thing out on the road and see what it can do.